Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here today representing LINKS, which is a leadership initiative of the U.S. Department of Education, their Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Ed, fondly known as OCTAE for most of us. I want to welcome you to Reboot Your Digital Strategy. Sometimes we all need a reboot, especially when faced with new and difficult challenges such as COVID-19. This workshop highlights some national initiatives, some resources and tools that adult educators can use to enhance their instruction and service anytime, but especially in times such as these. I promise you it's jam-packed full, and I hope that you can deal with my Southern accent until the end, because we even have some treasures that could be very helpful embedded in the end of the presentation as well. All right. Our objectives for today is that we want to make sure everybody has a good definition of digital literacy and why it's important for our learners. We want to think about the challenges that are faced by the learners, by the programs, and by ourselves, especially right now. We'll talk about those initiatives, resources, and tools, and we hope that you will choose at least one to implement with your learners and begin to draft a plan for how that's going to happen. The first thing I like for us to do is an activity. In a minute, I'm going to ask Eric to put the link to a Padlet in the chat box or question box, whatever it is that he uses to do that for the group. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and navigate there. And Eric, can you tell me, is it showing the Padlet on the screen now?
Give me 1 second. Yeah, I see the beach. Yes.
That's it. That's the beach. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. This is a Padlet, and I'm going to show you a few features about it, and he'll put that link into the box. But while we're waiting on that to happen, I learned some new things about Padlet. But when you have the link and you navigate here, you have the opportunity to double click on the beach scene, or you can click the pink plus sign, add sign on the bottom right hand corner. So I'm going to double click, and for some, there it goes. I thought I was going to have one of those moments where I know it was working a few minutes ago, but it did come up. But when a text box comes up, by either double clicking or using that add button, you can type into it. So I'm going to type my name. When you navigate here, we're going to ask you to put your name, your position, and your program, and then we're going to ask you to type in your biggest DigLit challenge right now, especially thinking about where we are in the world. And then I'd like for you to feel free to embellish your post with some available tools, and I'm going to describe some of those to you. This is really nice to know, because if you had no other tool but a Padlet, you could make assignments, you could have students post things, you could communicate back and forth, they could talk to each other, all on this one free digital tool. Right here, I have an upload button, so if I wanted to upload a document or a graphic or a picture, I could do that. I could add a link to a website here. I have the Google search. I have a camera. If I were to click that camera, it would ask for permission to use my device's camera, and I could take a picture of myself. I have over here on the right what I call a skinny, lazy snowman. Skinny because it's skinny 3 dots, but lazy because he's lying on his side. But I click that skinny, lazy snowman, and I get a lot of other tools. I'll give you a quick demonstration of a couple. One is voice. I clicked on voice. Now I click on the microphone, and it's recording what I'm saying. I've got 3 seconds of audio right there. I'm going to hit stop. If I want to play it back, I go to the right-hand corner. Oh, but you always have to remember to hit play. Microphone, and it's recording what I'm saying. I've got 3 seconds of audio right there. And then I click save. And it takes a minute for it to save, but that is going to actually show up in my post on the Padlet. So here I have an audio file. So it would be a way for students and teachers to leave voice messages for each other. I'm going to go ahead and click the X right here, that's going to delete my attachment of an audio file. Something else I wanted to point out, because I think it's fun and I think it's important to have fun when we're working with our learners. I'm going to click on the graphics search, and I'm going to look for something here. How many times have you heard this lately? We're all in this together. And I'll choose this one. So it's a way you can add a graphic too, but I could still type my message in up here. But there are some other embellishments too. So if you have that link and you are comfortable navigating to your browser, go ahead and do that now, and you will double click to open up a text box and put your name, your position, your program, and then any kind of embellishment you would like to add. I also want to point out, when I'm finished with mine, I click outside the box. Oh, look, how many of you are already there and doing it. Once you've done yours, you'll see this little button on other people's posts. You can click on that and add a comment. Now, because I did not have you sign in, you will have to tell them who you are. It's not going to know who you are. So you might, do something like, I'll add a comment right here. Hi, this is Mary. And so that's a way to begin to have students begin conversation between each other. You guys got this really fast. And while the rest of you are doing that, I will tell you a couple of features about it. Then I'm going to go ahead and jump back into the presentation, but we'll check back in on the Padlet later to give everyone time to put something up there. The way that it's that the posts are posting, it's doing the newest ones first, I believe. So the newest post would be up here. Once you've done a post, you can certainly go back and edit it. As the creator, I can trash a post. I have a feature available to me where I can turn off the comment if I want to, so that students would not be able to comment on other people's posts. There's another feature that can be used where you can screen the post before it shows up on the board, which, depending on your audience, can be a good feature. So lots of different ways to think about using this, both for personal and for professional use. We have talked to some educators over the last couple of months who this was their one tool. That's what they were using to post assignments, to send announcements for live lessons, and to talk back and forth to each other. So some great features. It is free when you sign up at Padlet.com. I think it allows you 3 Padlets in the beginning for the free version, but the more you refer other people to it, the more Padlets they will give you. It's never been an issue for me not to have a whole lot of Padlets. When I'm done with them, I archive them and then just start a new one. And if you find one that you like, I think you can kind of clone it and make it your own. Lots of different backgrounds. And I tend to use the description box to put my instructions.
So some people are asking about their interactivity. I had shared the link in the chat section of the control panel, and then I also had used it in response to an answer in the question area. So those are 2 places in the control panel where you should be able to find the link.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing that I was going to say about the Padlet that's nice is that it really, in addition to it being interactive between the teacher and the student, it's really a way for students to also get ideas about things that they want to write about, or topics that they're exploring. So say a student was writing something about COVID-19, getting other students to respond to their Padlet would give them information that they can include in their story. So it's not only kind of like a post-it, how am I doing kind of thing, but it can be an active and interactive place while people are doing their work.
Exactly, and can be very a way to build communication, way to build collaboration. And I encourage you, when you go to the Padlet site, look at their gallery. They feature how different people have used it, and there's different templates. Like, you can use it as a timeline, you can use it as a back channel, but you get a lot of ideas from looking at how different people have used it. So again, it's just one of those other tools for your toolbox, and I love it because it's just so easy.
Mary, there's some questions about accessibility. Can it be accessed via smartphone or other devices?
There's an app, yes. I haven't done it from a phone. I have had participants do it, but I do it from my iPad. I think it forces you to use the app on the iPad.
Okay. And to create
And
one, once you go to the site, it walks you through the steps of creating it, right?
Absolutely. And I've included, I'm going to jump back to the presentation. Like I said, we'll revisit this again in a few minutes. But, and it'll create a QR code, because that's always an issue too, especially when you're doing face-to-face. You don't want people to have to type in an address, but you can customize. You'll notice that the link to this Padlet, all of mine are going to have Padlet.com Gaston Educational, and then I was able to customize it by adding the NJALL to it. So you have those two features available as well. They made it very friendly. Here is okay, let me explain the turquoise. Any of these slides that have the turquoise on them, these are things that I have added to the links presentation. The links are standardized presentations, but I've been doing a lot of things in South Carolina. So when I think these are going to be helpful, I grab them from my own slide decks. And so these are clickable. These are just showing the different templates that you can use. And then here are tutorials that'll walk you through the use of Padlet. All right. Also, to frame today, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I think it's important to frame the conversation with a lot of the discussions that have been going on around the country over the last 2 months. And there was a question answer fact sheet sent out by Octay the end of March, which is our adult ed office at the U.S. Department of Ed. I'm going to be jumping back and forth again a lot because I like to show you things firsthand. But this is the fact sheet that was sent out. And of course, a major discussion has been distance learning. And it was interesting that, you know, Octay did not require states to report distance hours. It was up to a state to decide. And I want to put that disclaimer out there. These are not decisions that are made at the local program level. These are decisions made at the state level. But there were a lot of questions that came up because all of a sudden, one day, any instruction was all distance. So there are 3 models that they have approved that states choose to allow local programs. And I just wanted to make you aware of those. The clock time model was mainly what was being used in South Carolina before, and that's where you're using a software program that tracks time. And then teacher verification model, that was one that South Carolina has moved to using in addition to clock time, but we have not been using it in the past. And that's where, again, this is a decision at the state level where a teacher assigns a fixed number of hours for a task. And then when that task is successfully finished, completed, then that teacher can count that value of time as attendance time. Learner mastery is very similar. That's where you attach a value of time to a skill that a student would demonstrate through a test or some kind of assessment. And we like to frame this webinar with that because right now, many of us are on a huge learning curve and we're attending webinars that are taking place, you know, by presenters from different states. So we may hear some things that they're doing in other states, and it's nice to know what the options are, but it's also important for us to know what our state uses for distance learning as well. But those are 3 models that Octay has approved. And we'll go ahead and close that out. And since that memorandum came out the end of March, there's a follow-up one here for April the 7th, and there's also some guidance from the National Reporting System that's also about distance learning. Again, when you get this copy, these are all linked, so you'll be able to have each of the documents instead of having all that paper. Like I said, many of us have been on this huge learning curve. I've always been interested in using technology to enhance instruction, and I realize the importance of our students having strong digital lit skills. But at the same time, one day you had students and one day you didn't. Some had more of a transition period, but some places here in South Carolina, that's exactly how it happened. You found out on Friday you would not have students the next week, face to face. So a lot of us became very hungry. We had, in the beginning, it seemed like we maybe had a little bit of extra time. So I have been making a point of learning as much as I can and trying to build that toolbox back up so I can help others in my state and other places where I do webinars. But some of the strategies that have floated to the top, I think, are also important to frame today, and that's be real. I teach a graduate class every summer for South Carolina adult educators about integrating technology. And one of the assignments is to do a 3 to 5 minute instructional video. And I've had some teachers re-record that 50 times if they did it once. They want it to be perfect. And I always try to say, but we've been in front of those students every day for how long? And most of us are not perfect. And so our recorded lessons may not be perfect either. So I stress over and over again, we've got to be real. And I'm sure I'm going to mess up more than once today. And the important thing is you learn from it and you move on. And I think it sets a really good tone for our students. If they think they have to be perfect, they're going to be more reluctant to try something new. So I think modeling that for them is important as well. Consider your workspace. There's lots of jokes and Saturday Night Live videos about things that can happen, but if you're going to be on the camera, you want to be aware of what's showing. If you're going to have your mic open, you want to be aware of the background noise. With smaller groups, you can sometimes leave those mics open, but I think we have to teach etiquette about when to mute yourself. And we've had some of the ed tech webinars, which I'll tell you about later, on Friday afternoons, where some of the presenters have talked about doing activities with their students where they practice muting and they practice turning the cameras on and off. So they get familiar with the tools. It's not something that folks are automatically comfortable with. Also, my understanding is that the more you use cameras, the more data you are adding to the meeting, which some of our learners may be struggling with having enough data or having a good connection. So we want to be mindful of that as well. And we don't want to force them to have to turn the camera on when they may be struggling with bandwidth. At the same time, I always like to say, I think it's nice to connect face to face, at least for a few minutes, and let them see you and see each other. But once I get into a lesson, I like to cut that off and focus on what's on the screen. But again, that's a choice that we make. Make it about the learning objective and not the tool. That's so important. There can be some great tools out there that look like a lot of fun to use, but if it's not the best way to teach what we need to teach, we need to find a different way to do it. So it needs to be about the learning and not the technology. It is important to chunk. When we first made the transition, we learned that some folks were putting some lessons out there that were 45 minutes to an hour long of just instruction. That's great to have that much instruction, but if you do that, I encourage you to chunk it, put it in smaller bites. Eat the elephant a bite at a time. I think we'll lose our learners if we don't put in those pauses and those periods of engagement or either short lessons. And actually, research shows that the most effective lessons are about 3 to 5 minutes, and then you engage them in activity, and then you have another lesson. And be a learner, but don't get overwhelmed. If a lot of this is new to you today, you don't need to try to do everything. You need to focus and choose at least one thing, get comfortable, then come back and try another one. I'm going to jump out.
So Stefan, you had your hand up. Do you have a question or a thought? Guess not. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I wanted to jump back and show you the Padlet. Let's make sure I've refreshed. So I always like for folks to be able to see that there's made it, which of course you have it, so you can check as well. But jump back in.
I wanted to add something to that this slide here about being a learner and not being overwhelmed. Depending upon the students that you're working with, sometimes they may have more facility with the technology than you do, and that's fine. In fact, that's good, right? And your role is to help them with the content, help them with the language, with the literacy, with the reading, right? And you don't have to be a master of the technology to help your students via the technology.
Amen to that. Excellent point. And I think we actually increase our comfort zone when we acknowledge that, that you guys may know more about this than I do, but back to that, how many times we heard it, we're all in this together. So, it builds good leadership too. If you have leadership skills, if you have someone in the group who can step up, and help others with it. Great. All right, what is digital literacy? There is a definition that was used in the law. It came from the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences. And that definition is in WIOA, and it defined digital literacy as having the skills to find, evaluate, organize, create, and communicate information. You probably heard that before. It's a great definition. Since that time, there have been discussions to make that definition expanded a bit and make it even richer. For example, the one you're looking at on the screen, it's very similar to the one in WIOA, but it also added this solving problems in technology-rich environments. Another proposal for the definition of digital literacy actually shows up in the discussion group on Link's website, which we'll be talking about a couple more times today. They have discussion boards. It's called Communities of Practice, and they're divided up by subject areas, ESL, math, reading, language, career pathways, integrating technology. But you find your interest and you can create a user account so you can ask questions or share information. Or if you don't choose to do that, you can at least read the discussions that are taking place. They've been especially rich in the integrating technology group the last 2 months. But that group actually took this definition and suggested also adding using technology safely and ethically. So you can see the definition is building out the further we get into it. And not only safely and ethically, but also about using it not just for personal use, but also for work and for education. So very, very rich discussions about digital literacy and how important it is to our learners. Now, this is interesting. The Pew Research Center did a study back in 2013 and asked, of the adults in our country, who's not online? They did it again in 2018. So I'd like for you to take a minute and just guess. You could put it in the question box if you wanted to. Guess what percentage of American adults said they are not online in 2018?
15%, 25%, 30%, 15%. So a low of 15, a high of 40. Oh, low of 5. A low of 5, a high of 45. So a range of 5 to 45%.
Wow.
With many, yeah, sort of all at 50, 18%, 75%. So all right, so an incredibly wide range.
That is, and it's not quite as bad as what some of you think. 10% of US adults said that they were not online. Now, of course, they couldn't ask everybody, so it was a target group that they asked. Now, what I'd like for you to do is to think about, okay, this is US adults in general. Let's think about the US adults who don't have a high school diploma. Do you think it would be different? Do you think it would be higher?
Higher? No. Much higher? Yes, higher.
Well,
Higher,
yeah.
about the same, higher. Somebody says if you mean over 21.
Yes,
Yes.
I believe their definition was 21.
Yeah, no, same, higher, higher. Yeah, so variety of answers.
There you go. And it's actually about 3 times as many. Those are the folks that we're working with in the country, guys. Of course, you know, that's different than our language learners. But as far as those who don't have a high school credential, a third of them are not online. And we're trying to engage them off the cuff all of a sudden in order to help them. And in addition, they have a lot of other things on their minds right now. You know, I try to remind myself of that every day. I'm in a comfortable spot. I'm in a comfortable place with a lot of room around me. I'm not worried about children needing, competing with them for access to technology, or, you know, homeschooling them or assisting them while they're getting, you know, just, you know, and jobs. So again, it's not just the 30% who aren't comfortable, but there are a lot of other issues with that right now too. Another thing I wanted to point out about this, the first study was done in 2013. This was 2018. There was not much change. So it did not improve significantly from 2013 and to 18. Now, these same folks who said they weren't online were asked what their reasons for not being online were. And some of the biggest things they said, of course, were accessibility, affordability, ease of use, which they call the hassle factor, and also finding relevant content. And we'll talk more. That's sort of how the rest of this is divided up.
Jennifer had a question about if that statistic included smartphones, accessing it through a smartphone.
That is an excellent question, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but that slide has the link, and it has some other great information if you want to dig in more to that. But the question, I think, was worded online, so
Yeah.
it could be.
I believe it does. I believe it's a question of accessing the internet, not how you access it.
Yeah, but it's a very good question, and it's matter of fact, we're going to talk about that very thing in just a slide or two. So here we have access and affordability. I lumped those together, and these were two of the top reasons that folks said they weren't online. So when you think about access, what are we talking about? Access can mean a lot of different things. It can mean more of your service, which is these items at the top. It can mean your devices, which can be very different. It can be about finding relevant content, how to find it if you don't have the skills, and it can be your comfort level too, what skills you have, what digital literacy training. We'll talk a little bit more about this issue with devices. What many instructors are having to deal with too are groups that only have the smartphone, which we need to know that. We need to be aware of that when we're trying to develop this connection with students to try to help them continue their education, because it does have an impact on how we decide to design our instruction for them. All right, one day we had students and one day we didn't. So how, and again, I know different areas had different, played out in different ways. Here, I think, you know, not a lot of programs have classes on Fridays, and on Friday the announcement was made that there wouldn't be school the following week. So unless you had that connection already set up with your students, it's like, well, what do I do? You know, where do I go from here? So having a communication strategy is really job one. I think when we go back, we may think differently about strategies and tools that we need to set up. And it's not just about a world pandemic or a crisis, a worldwide crisis, but sometimes our students have a crisis. And having a strategy to stay in touch with them is really important. And some of you have different kinds of tools, and we'll describe some examples of these on the following slides. But chat and messaging tools are one way that we communicate with students, and some even still use telephones. That a lot of that has happened trying to track students down around where I am. We have meeting tools, and we have learning management systems. Now we'll talk about learning management systems in another section. But here are some of the popular chat and messaging tools, and you may have some others that you could put into the question box. But Remind has been very popular here for many years, and the teachers who had that set up already were really ahead of the game because they had a system, the students were familiar with it, and so they knew how to touch base. WhatsApp has become extremely popular too, and I've heard this one used, different webinars I've been in and presenters heard it used a lot around the country. This one has been extremely popular with the language learners in our state. So there's a series of webinars I'll point out at the end, but one of the presenters, I have her name also on a slide toward the end, but she does almost all her instruction through WhatsApp. She has created a group and she does her assignments, and the students submit their assignments using this group within WhatsApp. I know there's issues with it showing telephone numbers. Remind has that feature where it doesn't allow students to have access to a personal number. I've talked to teachers in our state who are using Facebook groups, and I always like to put this disclaimer in here. Depending on your supervisor and what's allowed, policies that your employer has in place, some of these may or may not work. But Facebook groups is one way to, a lot of the students are familiar with Facebook, especially older ones. I think younger ones, maybe not so much anymore. But you can do a closed group, and you can actually have live sessions. You can use it to chat back and forth, make announcements, send links, send assignments. And you don't have to be a friend with someone to invite them to your group. You be friendly to them, but you don't have to be a Facebook friend. I'm using my quotation marks. Slack, I'm not familiar with, but have heard that it is being used, and Google Groups, of course, is another one that is being used. Now, these are just the chat and messaging tools, and there's overlap. There are some things that work for both.
So Mary, before you move on,
okay.
Other recommendations are coming in. People are recommending talking points.
Talking points. That's
saying that it's a good messaging tool that enables translation. A couple people are recommending talking points. Google Voice within Google, and then other people are saying that they've used some of the other things too. Deborah asked a question about Department of Corrections, and maybe, Deborah, we have to have an online or a separate webinar about that, because I know that within the correctional context, there's sometimes limitations or restrictions on the types of digital resources that people can use. And so maybe that's something that we have to develop more generally, but then also particularly in the middle of COVID. So maybe follow up with me after the webinar via email, and we can try to think through the corrections issues.
Great point. And yes, they do have a lot more restrictions than they are a captive audience. But again, if you're not allowed in to do the face-to-face, there are other strategies you'll have to think about trying to explore. But yeah.
At least I see your corrections too. Anybody that's corrections, please send me an email, and we'll have a conversation about what NJAL can do to try to support you.
Great. All right, meeting tools. Zoom is my tool of choice, although I may change based on something I'm going to tell you when we get to Google Meet. But Zoom I've been using for a very long time. I'm very comfortable with it. That's the main thing. What are you comfortable with? But also, what are your students going to be comfortable with? You might have to do something different in order to enable them as well. Zoom can be used to record an instructional lesson, as well as to do live lessons. Uber Conference, I'm not as familiar with, but I have heard it's being used. Skype has been around for quite some time. Microsoft Teams is what our State Department is using for our statewide meetings now. It functions a lot like Zoom. If pretty much if you've used one, you often feel comfortable in another. GoToMeeting I don't have up here, but that's a relative of the GoToWebinar. Google Meet made an announcement last week. Before last week, there are two kinds of accounts that you have with Google. One is if your school district, or nonprofit has G Suite. If you had that, G Suite for education or G Suite for nonprofit, you had Google Meet. But if you had a personal Google account, you did not. And I know this to be true because I have both, and I would have to think about which one I was in if I wanted to start a Google Meet meeting. One would work and one wouldn't. They announced last week that even for those who have the personal public Google account, they now have access to Google Meet. They were rolling it out gradually, and it was amazing to me how fast that happened. I read the announcement one day, and the next day I tried it, or maybe 2 days later, tried it out, and they said, we're not there yet, but we will be soon. And then the next day I tried it again, and I was able to do it. So you do have lots of options, and these aren't the only ones. These are just some that are representative.
Mary, there's a couple questions about some of these. Stacy wants to know if Google Meet has a whiteboard function.
Yes. Wait, I believe it does. I'm thinking Hangouts maybe didn't, but I think Google Meet does and Zoom does.
Okay.
And Google also has something called Jamboard.
Right, that's a shared whiteboard.
Yeah.
And then is it Jigsaw? I'm not sure. I assume by that you mean, can you divide students up into different groups, into different rooms?
For Zoom and Google Meet, I know that to be true. Microsoft Teams, I think you can too. We're actually, our graduate class this summer for DigLit, we're going to, we do it through College of Charleston. They're not going to allow us to do face-to-face, so we're going to do Zoom. And what we'll do is live instruction in what I call the main room, and then divide up into breakout rooms for activities and group work and individualized work. And then the way that works is they can raise their hand or send a message to the main room for the instructor to come to that room. And then the instructor can also close the room, which causes everybody to come back into the main room. And I think Google Meet works in a similar fashion.
One of the ways to do workarounds here is if the device doesn't have a native whiteboard, is that you could grab the screen and create a whiteboard on your own computer and then share what's on your computer. Right.
That's great.
So that's one way to do that. There was a question about record while doing a live video on Zoom.
Yes, I do that. Now it depends on what I'm doing as to whether, you know, if I'm doing a meeting, sometimes I don't put it on. Like I do what's called a cookbook with new directors throughout the year. I don't record that. I want it to be a very comfortable space and folks not to worry about it. When I use record for the most part is when I'm recording a lesson, and then there's different choices about where you store that. If you were doing Meet, you could store it on your drive. If you're doing Zoom, you can store it. I store those on drive too, or you can store it on a computer, but you have to figure out how you're going to give access to folks through that. And how are you going to send them the link to get to that recorded lesson?
There's some questions about breaking up students in Google Meet and also Zoom. I don't know if we want to get into the weeds with that. So maybe the best thing is just to say, you know, I think once you start using that platform, there's usually instructions about how to break students off.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. All right. Everyoneon.org. This has to do with accessibility. I'm going to jump out and show you this. This is a national nonprofit. Lots of partners, but it has a Spanish version. I want to point that out as well. Very easy. This is a tool for your learners. There are lots of other lists out there right now that are more complicated that you probably wouldn't want to have your learners sift through. But this is a way for them to jump on. I've tested some zip codes from New Jersey, but for right now, I'm just going to use mine. But what you do when you get to the site is you click Find Offers, and then you enter your zip code. And once you enter your zip code, the student would then check the items that apply. So I'm going to click, I have a K-12 student or a college student. It seems to be running slow. Normally it pops right back up. I'm going to click participate in the school lunch program. It's spinning, so I may be having a, may have to jump back in another time. For some reason, it's really having an issue. Let's see if I can go here. May have had it loaded too long. No, and it could be the site, but anyway, you check the items that apply, and when you do that, below you will see the internet offers that are available in your area. And my area, I can tell you, if I have a college or a K-12 student, I have one offer available. If I have a child in the lunch program, I have 3 offers available. They're not free offers, but they're reduced costs. Like AT&T has a great one, a great bundle for $10 a month. It provides free installation and a free modem. It also tells you about devices that have been rebuilt and refurbished. In my area, I think there's a laptop that can be purchased for $160, a desktop for $140. In addition, it also tells where a person could go for face-to-face digital training when you're not in the middle of a pandemic. I encourage you to try this for the zip code of where you teach, because if chances are a library will show up as being the place to go for training, but if your center wants to offer that as well, I would suggest, and you don't show up, I would suggest hitting contact us and asking them how to get your center listed on that page. So when people are using this tool, they can be referred to your site as well. So that is everyoneon.org. And I hope that this is not a sign of how the rest of the webinar is going to go. Maybe we were all trying to do it at one time.
Yeah.
All right. Everyoneon.org. Northstar Digital Literacy is another great site. If you're not familiar with that, so let's say you overcame having a device and you overcame having access or service. Now I need to know how to use it. And Literacy of Minnesota, they've had Northstar for quite some time, and it went through a major update, I think about 1.5 years ago. But this right here is available to anyone at no cost. You can refer your students here, even if you don't use it as a tool within your classroom. But you would click Take an Assessment. All of these are wonderful. They are not where you check, it's not multiple choice. It's where you're actually demonstrating how to do these tasks that are required. And you can see each one of these is a different assessment. So for free, and it has narrative. So it's giving instructions. Someone doesn't just have to read the instructions. And it gives a really nice tutorial in the beginning. But when a person takes one of these at the end, they get the results, and it shows what they do know as well as what they don't know. Very quickly, because that's, again, a session for another day. There are other things available on this site. There are tutorials, and some of these I think are available during the pandemic, but normally these are just for folks who are testing locations. There is a fee to becoming a testing location. Now, anybody can take these online. A testing location is an organization who agrees to give it according to Northstar's assessment policy and proctor the test. And then there are actual Northstar certificates that can be awarded based on those assessments. And they've actually experimented and are now doing some distance proctoring during this time when they can't do the face-to-face. So wonderful information, wonderful tools. I encourage you to take one of them. Go back to the site later and take one of the next slide is Digital Learn. So after you've done the assessment and you know what you know how to do, but there's some things you need to work on. This is by the Public Library Association. I'm going to scroll slowly. These are all of the modules that are available. For those of you that save corrections or whatever, my understanding these can be downloaded, and I think there's paper transcripts as well. But you can see the time allotted for each one of the modules, and they have some of these available in Spanish as well. So that's one source. Another source for digital training is GCFLearn Free, and that was developed by Goodwill Industries. Again, these can be downloaded as well, and they're more than just digital literacy. They also have job training, reading, and math skills. All right, I think we're ready for the first poll. And the way I did the polls, Eric's going to share it, but it's a time to reflect on the tools that we've talked about and maybe focus in on one that really interests you. So as a quick review, as you're thinking about what your selection will be for the poll, we talked about communication tools. Those were chat and messaging and meeting tools. We talked about everyoneon.org that would allow folks to find affordable resources. We talked about Northstar Digital Literacy, which is the assessment site. We talked about Digital Learn, which is the public library system online digital skills training, and then GCFLearn Free, which is the one by Goodwill, developed by Goodwill. So we'd like to see which one you have the most interest in pursuing after the webinar. Not right after the webinar, but sometime after the webinar.
All right. All right, the votes are rolling in. About 30% of the people have voted. Lorraine, you had your hand up. Did you need to be unmuted?
Yes, let me unmute. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you're unmuted.
Okay, I can't figure out how to vote, so maybe I'm in desperate need of these glasses.
Did the poll show up on your screen?
It did, but it's not allowing me to click on it.
Okay. If you can't click on it, then just, I guess, put your answer maybe in the question area. I think you're not the only person that can't click.
Okay, thanks, Eric.
Yep.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. When I escaped from when I hit my escape button,
then you can see it.
I made it small when it was on the full screen. It wouldn't let me click, but when I made it small, it let me click.
Okay.
Okay,
right. Hopefully that helps for everybody too. All right, thanks, Lorraine. All right, so we got about 70% people voting, and once we get to 75, I'm going to close the poll. All right, so the results are Northstar Digital Literacy with 33%, Communication Tools with 31%, Everyone On with 16%, Digital Learn with 15%, and GCFLearn Free at 5%. And then in the question section, there was kind of a mix of all of those, although Northstar and Digital Learning, Northstar Digital Literacy was clearly the favorite.
Oh, and it is fantastic. So so mark it down, you know, and that's one of the reasons I like to do the poll this way. There's so much, but if you know, you vote for something, it might help it really stand out when you try to remember what was that I really wanted to do. All right, well, we're gonna move on. I don't think we're gonna get to everything, but as we go through, I'll try to hit some of them faster than I normally do. This is a great site. It's cast.org. And when we're thinking about accessibility, I breezed right through that. We're in a new section, ease of use, called the hassle factor. But when we're designing instruction, whether it's face-to-face, but especially for distance, we really need to think about being as inclusive as possible. Universal Design for Learning Guidelines, this is just the heading of the chart on the website. I encourage you to check it out. The main point of this is we need to think about doing multiple ways of engaging students. And engaging is how we recruit them and how we help motivate them and how we retain them, get them to persist. We also need to think about representing our own information in more than one way. Don't just talk, don't just give visual, but represent it multiple ways of representing information, and then allowing students to show us what they know. Give them some choice about how they can do it. Don't always make it something they have to write. It could be a video that they make demonstrating something. It could be something that they draw or a picture that they find. So just keeping those things in mind. Sometimes being inclusive is just about keeping our mind open and thinking about how to include as many people as possible. A great website to explore. Also, when we're thinking about reaching our students, we need to think about how they're connecting. We talked about this earlier with the devices. I'm going to show you something I didn't know existed. I use Google Slides a lot. PowerPoint has a similar tool. This is when I'm in presentation mode using Google Slides. This is my menu bar. And right here is closed captioning. I'm going to click on my actual menu bar with closed captioning so that you can see what happens. It automatically does the closed captioning for me. Now, the sad part is if you're recording this lesson to share out later, and you want students to watch a recorded version, they are not going to have the captions do not record. If you wanted to develop a recorded lesson that has captioning, there's a slide later that has a link where you can explore doing that. You would make your recording using maybe your camera on an iPad or your camera on your phone, or maybe use Screencastify, but you would do your lesson and record it, and then you would upload it to YouTube. And as long as it's under 10 minutes, YouTube provides the closed captioning for videos. So again, there's instructions for that, a webinar for another day. Considering what fonts we use is important. Folks have visual discrimination issues. They're going to want simpler fonts. Those are called sans serif. I think of it as being without the fancy stuff. It's just very basic fonts. Two, if folks are using smartphones and you're doing slide presentations, they're going to need to watch those in landscape mode, and some of them may not know how to unlock their screen. So when they rotate it, it will be in the right. The screen will follow the phone in landscape mode. That might be an opportunity for one of those students to step up and coach that classmate through how to do that. But also using larger font is going to be important. One of the presenters from Ed Tech recommended 24, which is larger than what I have on the screen right now. I think I typically use about 18 or 20. So, and keeping the graphics on your slides very simple. Color and contrast need to be considered. Using templates helps the screen reader navigate through, and then avoiding acronyms and making sure if we do use an image when we're teaching, describe the image or put a caption with the image. I'm going to turn the closed captioning off so I don't see myself talk. I keep wanting to see how they're interpreting. I have to say, Google does a much better job with my Southern accent than some of the other voice does. A lot of fun to watch that.
As you were talking about that, Denise suggested Storyboard That as a good website to use for students to do visual summaries of the chapter of their novel. I'm going to storyboard that with exclamation point. All these suggestions that are showing up in the question, I'll list and include when I send out the email with the information about the archive and their professional development certificate.
Okay, and here's one of those screens I grabbed from another presentation and slid in here, not so much to present, but to have it as a reference for you. So, you know, right here, it has more info. These are just diagrams, and then of course, how to upload video. Bookshare is a partnership between Benetech and the U.S. Department of Ed. It's normally a paid subscription. They have a library of over 400,000 materials that are available in customized formats such as audio, digital braille. As long as a student, an adult student, has a documented disability, a qualified one, which is you can read about on their site, as long as they can document that disability, they get a free subscription to Bookshare, which is pretty amazing, that kind of library. I will not navigate to this right now, but this is the links community of practice that I mentioned earlier, the discussion boards. I may have failed to say that you can go there and read these discussions. This is a link to a conversation about learning management systems. But if you want to contribute, you do have to create an account. It doesn't cost anything, and you can use that account for other links features as well. But I noticed this conversation several months ago. I think it may be back in December, but it was a great conversation about learning management systems in general, but specifically Google Classroom. And that's where I learned that you could have Google Classroom even if you have that personal Gmail account, which it has benefits, but again, that's for another day. If you're members of COABE, I attended an excellent webinar on Google Classroom last week done by Melinda Holt from California, and it is now recorded and on their adult ed repository. It's free if you're a member of COABE. It was fantastic. I'm a user of Google Classroom and I learned so much, plus she was so entertaining. There's an advantage to using a learning management system. Just think if we had had this in place before we found out we would no longer have face-to-face contact. It's great to integrate, you know, it engages students in using digital skills without them even knowing that it's happening. I used to be a director, and one of my instructors that worked with first, second, and third grade level readers actually used Edmodo in the classroom, and they had to log in daily, and there was an activity for them to do. They helped each other. They learned so much by doing that. But having that central place for announcements, conversations, links, resources is really a great resource, but it's a great way to share links to things, you know, so you don't have to worry about QR codes or people having to type in addresses. But it also prepares our students for the future with post-secondary as well, because they're gonna have to do it if they move on past us. And that's just an example of one of my Google Classrooms. And this gives you a little bit of information. If you are a nonprofit or school or school district, you do qualify. You have to go through their application process, but anyone with a Google account can use Classroom for free. And that's a link there that gives you more information. These are basically 3 steps. I think I set my first class up in 2 minutes. Very simple to use. And then here are some other examples. There's Edmodo, Moodle, Canvas, and there are others. Schoology offers a free account as well. Again, I only talk about the free ones. And some of the free ones, like Edmodo, also has a subscription, like if you don't want to see the ads, but it's been very manageable to use as free as well. All right, here's the next poll. If you want to vote on your choice, which one interests you the most? We talked about accessibility and universal and design for learning, thinking about those things in order to include more learners. We talked about closed captioning, talked about Bookshare, talked about links community of practice discussion boards, and we talked about learning management systems.
All right, so it's up and running, Mary. At my university job at Montclair State, I've used both Moodle and we currently use Canvas. I liked Moodle because I was able to organize my template the way I wanted to. You know, I could organize to some extent, I could organize the interface in a way that made sense to me, whereas Canvas is set. But there are some nice features of Canvas.
And don't you find that though? It's like, I like this one better for this reason, but that one, that's.
In Canvas, I'm using a Big Blue Button for my online classes. So it functions like it has the professor or the teacher can share their screen. There's shared whiteboards. There's polls. You can upload information and stuff. So it's been pretty convenient.
And two, I think once you learn one, and that's what industry says now. They want learners who can transfer the learning.
Right.
You learn Edmodo, and then it's easier perhaps to use Canvas because some of the things just transfer.
Or Class Dojo or all these other things. Yes.
Yeah.
So learning management systems 46%, universal design for learning 22%, the links community of practice 12%, closed captioning 11%, and Bookshare 9%.
All right. I do encourage you, if you were not using a learning management system before, consider doing it when you go back. Again, it's not just about if there's a worldwide crisis again, which perhaps there will be, but it's also for some of our learners, it gives them another way to stay connected, but you're preparing them for their future as well.
There's two key questions here. Tracy wanted to know if G Suite is available for offline classrooms. I think in the correction setting, the idea of being able to use that technology since they can't have internet access, I'm wondering if there's an intranet ability to do that. Do you know?
I do not know. I apologize.
Okay, so Tracy, that's something that we can explore offline. Another one. And then Lynn wants to know if there's an LMS that's easiest for students who only have a cell phone.
I've had students use Edmodo with a cell phone, and I think Google Classroom would be. I can't speak to the others because I haven't used them.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. All right, relevance. This was another one of the challenges that the folks who weren't online said, it doesn't apply to me. I don't need anything online. The problem with the internet is also the wonderful thing about the internet. There's wonderful information, but there's some that's not so wonderful too. But this is a really great report done by the American Institute of Research, and they do a lot of projects for adult education. And this report, one of the quotes that came from it was, "Much good content remains largely invisible to students." And I think we really need to create that culture of finding out what interests our students and connecting them to things that they need for instruction online, but also encouraging that exploration of things that interest them personally. And that could even be an assignment where they have to find something and then share it with family or share it with others in the classroom. So how do you find good content? The Links Learner Center, now there's a learning center for us as educators, but there's a learner center. They don't, it doesn't cost them anything, but it is a place where they can go and access, these are all federally funded educational resources. And you can see that there's one for ABE and there's also one for ESL. So I encourage you to explore that. Again, these are only going to feature those federally funded educational resources. The Links Resource Collection is a great place to look for materials, look for information. These are all peer reviewed. But say, for example, you wanted to find something on math and manufacturing and you wanted it to be instructional material, you can do all those filters. So they have a lot of research, but they have a lot of practical hands-on materials as well. So if you haven't explored that, I encourage you to use that. You don't have to have an account for that part of the website. If you want to participate in discussions, you need it there. But if you just want to read discussions, you don't have to have it, and you don't have to have it to find resources. Google Applied Digital Skills. I don't know if y'all had one of the boot camps that was it was a joint project between COABE and Google. But if you haven't explored Google Applied Digital Skills, I encourage you to. A lot of educational providers don't consider adult ed when they design things. Google did. They listened. but you can see this is something students can do on their own, or teachers can use in the classroom, or they can create a classroom within this Applied Digital Skills and make assignments to students and follow them on their progress. But it's all about acquiring digital skills in project-based curriculum. Students will watch a 5-minute video or a 3-minute video, and then they have a task to do. And it's it's contextualized to real life problems. But when they're finished, they have mastered some of the Google tools that will help them. Whether they use Google in the future or whether they use Microsoft, it's still going to be the same kind of basic skills. Oh, it wanted me to go to the site. If you haven't been to Crowd-Ed Learning, I encourage you to go there. Jeff Gumas is, it's a nonprofit out of Chicago, about 5 minutes, I'm hurrying. He's out of Chicago, and it is a wonderful site. They're actually building a tool called Skill Blocks that if you haven't watched one of those webinars, I encourage you to. It is a way to create a learning plan that is standards-based, and you can save that as a PDF and send it to a student, or you can have a student log on and get it. But it's all open educational resources. So they've also added to the library the popular vendor items like Tabe Tutor and Score Boost. Now those the students would not be able to access online, of course, because they're paid resources, but it would still align those resources that you have to the standard. So if you knew a student needed to work on a specific standard, you go to Skills Blocks, you put in what that standard is, and it gives you all of the options, whether it's CK12 or Khan Academy, Math Antics, and you can actually build a digital learning plan for your students. Again, that's a webinar that Jeff has done and is actually recorded and available on the website. There are other resources there as well.
Yeah, hang on a second. Tracy, did you want to chime in with something? I see your hand up. Nope. Okay.
Okay, and there's a slide about skill blocks too. I encourage you to check that out. And here are some other ones. Some of you may already be doing it. Other resources for relevant content. The nice thing about some of the ones we just looked at, they kind of house a lot of these. They house a variety. If you go to Crowd-Ed Learning, you will see a lot of these indexed on Crowd-Ed Learning website. So you're not having to go to a lot of different ones.
Can I say something quick about some of these sources, sure. Mary? So
sure.
I think that these sources are like any other source, right? And that we need to read them critically and triangulate, right? So as teachers, we have to make sure that we're comfortable with the materials. I know some people that do math who feel that some of the Khan Academy videos aren't exactly 100% accurate when it comes to some of the math instruction. So, you know, like anything, you have to read it, analyze it, and sort of critique it.
Amen. And I'm glad you said that, because if we didn't still need to be the teacher, then we wouldn't be needed. These are great resources that we can put to use, but if they could do it without us, where are we? You know, so you're exactly right. We need to review them and put a critical eye towards them. Excellent point. Do we want to skip this poll?
I think so, yeah.
All right. All right, again, we did the Links Learner Center, Resource Collection, Applied Digital Skills, Crowd-Ed Learning, and Skill Blocks. And I've got 2 minutes, so I'm going to go really fast through this.
You're not going to turn into a pumpkin at 4:15. If it goes a couple minutes over, it'll be.
I promise them there's treasure at the end, so I'll try to get there. The Learning Portal has online self-paced coursework that's developed by Links. You do have to have an account for that. There's no cost to it. So check that out if you're looking for a learning opportunity. And you can see they do have an integrating technology, and they also have one for technology related to ESL. Tech tip blogs. Jen, who is going to be on here doing a webinar on Thursday, this is where she works, Ed Tech at World Education. And David Rosen, who's going to be doing that webinar with her, he is actually the moderator for the Integrating Technology Discussion Board at Links. And so they do a lot of projects together, and one of them that they've done together that's just been published. They're going to be sharing on Thursday. But if you go to this website, I strongly encourage you. This is new. This is a great website anytime, but this is done in response to COVID. It is a treasure chest. Every Friday, they have been doing these webinars, and they have practitioners do these lightning rounds of talks, and then you can follow them into a breakout room and ask questions. You get to choose which one you follow, but they've recorded all of those, and they're here. They've also taken a project that David has done, where all the great strategies and resources that have been shared in the discussion board on links, he has put together a Google document, and people have added stuff to it, and he kind of oversees it, and there's a link to that on that page as well. So again, a treasure chest, check it out. These are all activity builders. Some of them you've heard of, some of them might be new to you. I want to point out, I love quizzes. It's like Kahoot, but there's a coronavirus quiz developed by their editors that I thought was well done. So I put a link there for you for that. Bingo Baker was something I just found this week. We're looking for some additional activities. Bingo Baker, you can create your own bingo cards and send digital, so students could take an iPad or a phone and mark the bingo cards on, and you can contextualize it to what you're doing. It's not just numbers, you can do vocabulary.
Mary, can you go back one slide, back to that slide?
Sure.
Just as a quick aside, Kahoot, for those of you that have played around with Kahoot before, many of you are doing, or maybe you're doing what my family is doing and having family Zoom check-ins. One way to make the family Zoom check-in more lively is to do a Kahoot for your family. And so you can come up with like trivia questions about like a trip that you all took, and then play Kahoot about your trip while you're all on Zoom together. That's just an
That's a great idea. I've got a friend who's Thursday night, they're doing game night with family connecting up, which is super idea. And two, a lot of times you can find one that's close to what you want, right, and you can grab it and edit it, so you're not having to start from scratch. Goose Chase is an online scavenger hunt, which again can be a lot of fun. There's a free account. We've had a lot of fun with that. And you can do these as homework assignments. They don't always have to be played live. Goose Chase is a scavenger hunt, and the team members respond either by, you set it up to respond by text, by photograph, or by video, limited to 15-second videos. So you give them a task, and when they send it in, it's one of those ways. So, you can just think about how it could be used for fun, but also how it could be used for instruction as well. Great ideas. I'm not going to go over this. This is just if you haven't used Google Form as a quiz, really great instructions here. I had a link to one I was going to show you, but it's really simple. You create a form that is your quiz, and then you go to settings, and then you make it a quiz, and you just follow the instructions. And then this is something another teacher had shared. But having things like this, the Kahoot, the quizzes, the Google Forms, is great to put in those pauses where you want to try to engage students, and you make it fun, but at the same time use it as a formative assessment. Probably won't have time to share this, and I hate it. She was one of the presenters on the EdTech Friday afternoon webinars, but I will jump out of it just to show you, because it is well worth checking out. I want you to see it. She has created what we call a hyperdoc in a tool called Wakelet. It doesn't have to be done in Wakelet. It could be done on a document created in Google or a Word document. But this is her lesson on coronavirus. I encourage you to check it out. A lot of the content she used came from a site called Share My Lessons, but she starts with a KWL chart and then has some content. And then I really wanted to show you the Edpuzzle that she created. If you're not familiar with Edpuzzle, it is a way you can take a YouTube video or any kind of video, I guess, and clip it. You can make it just the selection that you want. You can do voiceover in it. And you can also insert questions. So this is a video about coronavirus, and she has inserted questions at these time points. I do want to point out, when you go there, guys, you don't have to learn how to do this right off the bat. Look at this option. As long as you are logged in, and I log in with my Google account, you can copy her Edpuzzle, and then you can edit it. You can copy anyone's on there that you find, and you can edit it. But I encourage you to check this out, play it, and see how the question pops up. It'll pause the video. The student has to answer the question before and then tell the video to move on. It gives them an option to go back and watch in case they were texting instead of watching the video too, which I think is really nice. Great tool, Edpuzzle.
Casey wants to know if Edpuzzle can be a source that's accessible offline. Not if it's got links that go back out to the internet.
I would have to check on that. I do not know. I can tell you that I meant to point that out too. When we were at Google Applied Digital Skills, that one, they have, whether they've resolved it or not, I don't know, but that was something we were pursuing with them to do digital skills inside corrections, and they said it was on their radar and they were working on it. And then Microsoft has something similar, and I think they had already figured out a way to allow people to download those so it could be used offline.
Okay, something to pursue. Yeah, good.
But all these questions y'all are asking, I don't know the answer to. Now I'm gonna go crazy until I find them. But find out the answers. But here is the instructions of how to do Edpuzzle. And another example, Susan's is very simple. She's frying her eggs and making her own video. You notice Ashley used a YouTube video. Susan likes to make her own. She has language students. So you can check out her Wakelet too. She was another presenter. And here's, if you like the way Wakelet presented, I think it's a very professional way to present a lesson. And some people assign those lessons for students to work through. Ashley says that's what she uses to guide her instruction. So she walks students through the steps on the Wakelet. This is a treasure chest. Right here, remote learning with smartphones. Check it out. Crowded Learning's teacher tools. Here's the links community of practice list of resource, that's that document David is overseeing with lots of strategies and resources. Here are all those webinars I've been referring to. I strongly suggest if you're interested in checking those out as well. We will skip that. One more for the road. I just learned this last week and wanted to share. It was a big question in South Carolina. People wanting to share worksheets that were PDFs, but allow students to fill them in. There is a great video here by Teacher Tech Tips. Short, it's 10 minutes, I think, that shows you how to do that. You use Google Slides to put the PDF on, and then shows you how to make it a fillable worksheet. And then you could send each student a copy, and they could enter text directly onto that PDF. And then this shows, for example, if you do something like that and you want each student to have their own copy, you open the document and copy the link, and you change the word edit to copy. And you've probably had things shared with you, but that's what comes up for the student. So that way you're not having students typing over each other into the same document. They each have their own version that they can work on. That was just one I said, I have to share. It's not links without building all of this on research. Each of these are great practitioner friendly, user friendly, straight to the classroom tips built on bodies of research. And that's where all of these ideas, strategies have been taken from. So I encourage you, there are links to each one of those. And that's what I like as an educator. I don't want to read the full volume. I want the Reader's Digest version. Give me the condensed part that's going to make me a more effective teacher where I'm still evidence-based. And if y'all would share in the question box your best takeaway from today. What was your best takeaway? On your own, you'll work on a plan, when you're going to do it, who you're going to do it with, how you're going to do it. But in the box, I'd love to hear what your best takeaways were. And if you don't mind, Eric will paste into the box the link to a survey. This is how I get paid, you guys. If you take the survey, they read these back at links, and it's very serious. Whatever you say, we take to heart and we try to do better.
I'm going to send the link out when I send out the form.
That's great.
So people will have the chance to do it. So people are saying Ed Puzzle. They didn't know that they could put questions over video. The tech training for students. Yeah, the survey is going to come in and out. So there's going to be an email that has the certificate and a link to the archived version of it. I just want to remind everybody that we're a 100% volunteer organization. So sometimes it takes a while to get these things out, but we will get them out.
And I appreciate you doing that. And if you guys, when you get it, if you don't mind, please take the time and give me feedback. Like I said, I don't get better if you don't tell me what I need to fix. I already am making notes about what the questions I need to be able to answer about corrections. So.
Robin notes that what she learned was that she needed to learn more.
Me too, every day.
Yeah, every day, all the time. Let's see other ideas. So Lynn's suggesting that their program needs to integrate an LMS into the program. So even when they were returned to in-person to accentuate the instruction.
I love that. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the fillable PDF forms, that's a big thing. That's important. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, this is something that I've been long saying with technology, right? Is that to reiterate something that you said in the beginning, to make sure that the technology is the vehicle for the lesson and not sort of the end of the lesson, you know?
Right.
So,
yes.
You know, I always like that phrase that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? so that if you start with a piece of technology and you're just focused on that, you're going to think everything is going to be solved by that piece of technology, right? Rather than saying, what's the problem? Now I need to find a piece of technology that's going to help me solve that problem.
That's right. And this year it may be one, and next year it may be a different one because, you know, you've learned about something else that you go, oh, that will do that better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing another takeaway is getting corrections on top of this. Yes, I agree. Yeah. I am particularly concerned when I'm reading things about how much people who are in correctional facilities having to pay per minute to access ebooks and things like that. And it's really, really problematic. It's really, really problematic. So
someone shared, I'll have to go back through some notes, Eric, and maybe send it to you. Someone shared in a webinar, it was, it was a meeting we had with Jeff Gumas and some states talking about proxy hours. They shared a tool that they take into the corrections facility, and they were not that expensive, but I'll have to dig back through notes to find that.
Okay. Stacy adds our key takeaways: designing instruction to be more inclusive, including multiple ways of engagement, right? And that's true whether we're in the middle of a pandemic or not.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I want to thank Mary for, I think, both kind of the big picture, right? The philosophical overview, which I think is the crucial thing, but then also following through with some very concrete examples of resources and ways to use those resources. So I'm sorry you weren't able to do it in person, but I'm very happy that you were able to present for about 100 people today here in New Jersey.
Is that right? About 100?
Yeah. Yep.
That's great. And you all have great ideas, and you jump right on that Padlet activity, and I've had a good time. And I hope everyone took away at least one thing.
Yes. All right. So unless there's any other last minute questions, thanks again, Mary. Stay safe, everybody.